imagine going to see the Tasmanian Devils at either Lonnie or Hobart, and just how many excited people there are going to be there. It's going to be a real cauldron, I think. Welcome back, everyone. Felix, Ellis and Simon Behrakis. We're talking Tasmanian politics, and today on the podcast we'll be talking about the stadium and Tasmania's incredible efforts at the top of numerous now national leagues in our country, and we'll be talking Australia Day and finally capping things off with a few of the big housing wins that have happened in recent weeks. So, Simon, how are you? Did you enjoy your Australia Day long weekend?
I did. It was great to celebrate our great country, to get around, attend citizenship ceremonies, and spend time with family and really reflect on and celebrate all the things that makes Australia such a fantastic country. And what I think, and I'm sure you'll agree, is the greatest country in the world, Felix. So it was a fantastic long weekend, and Australia Day especially. And look, it is really important to take those times and reflect and think on what it is that makes Australia the country that it is.
Yeah, big time. And you and I are both from migrant families in part, so we'll reflect on that a little later in the podcast. But first, the most important thing to celebrate, how about the Hobart Hurricanes? What an incredible result.
What an incredible result, and how fantastic was it to see that on our home ground, and to see what so many Tasmanians get around it, support it and celebrate it, and be there for such a fantastic win. It's fantastic to see, and it really does inspire not just Tasmanians but the next generation that want to get into these sports and really represent our state in the future in sports. And it's really encouraging to see young people want to get into that as well.
100%. And obviously the Premier, our government's talked a lot about what the aspiration piece is for the new stadium. I think it was summed up so perfectly with that amazing set of photos from the man of the match, Mitch Owen, 108 off 40-odd balls, just the greatest ever innings in Big Bash history in my view, and the photo of him at one of the first ever games played in the Big Bash when he was just a little kid watching on from the sidelines. I mean, talk about aspirations and the things that can happen when you've got a sporting pathway for young people.
And that's exactly what we want to encourage. I've got a friend of mine, he's got a young son. Before the Jack Jumpers came into the picture, he had no interest in basketball, but seeing the Jack Jumpers up close, meeting them, going to the games in person, now all he wants to do is be a basketballer. And these sort of things are exactly what we want to encourage, to inspire the next generation and our young Tasmanians. Because if they can see it, then they can strive for it. But if it's something that just is something, like the AFL is for Tasmanians at the moment, something that is on TV and that's it. There's no real viable or visible path to, if you live in Tasmania, to become an AFL player. But with the Jack Jumpers, with the Hurricanes, people can see that, and we've seen that with the Hurricanes, and we can see it now with the Jack Jumpers. You have young kids going to these games, seeing our great Tasmanian sportsmen play, and going, I want to do that, and I want to dedicate myself to becoming the next great athlete for Tasmania. And it's so fantastic to see. It's something that we continue to support, but it's, we need to continue to do that work, and we want Tasmanian kids to say, I want to be the next AFL player, and to do it for a Tasmanian team would be nothing short of tremendous. So that is why we continue to support these things, and it's why it's so fantastic to see not just these great wins, but to see the look of inspiration on these kids' faces when they attend games, when they see Tasmanian sportsmen, Tasmanian players playing in Tasmania.
And one of the most amazing things, I think, for the game was just how good the crowd was. The Mitchell Owen chants, the getting stirred up. They were effectively, the real 12th man of the game, I think, the Hobart Hurricanes fans, and sold out the stadium. I think it was 4 minutes or something like that, which is just proof that we actually do need a bigger stadium for Tasmania and a place for our footy team to call home, because Tasmanians love basketball and they love cricket, but when it comes to sports, man, this is a football state, and the fact that you can sell out a game in Launceston watching the Hawks. And full disclosure, I'm an Eagles fan, so I'm no Hawks fan, but been along to the games a few times. But imagine going to see the Tasmanian Devils at either Lonnie or Hobart, and just how many excited people there are going to be there. It's going to be a real cauldron, I think.
It is, and it has proven that we can fill those stadiums, and there is the demand. There are Tasmanians that have shown that they will attend. We are patriotic and parochial a lot in Tasmania. We do get behind our own, and when we do have a Tasmanian team, it's very, very clear that Tasmanians will get behind that, and we need a stadium that can cater to that. And importantly, the stadium itself isn't just about the AFL team itself. That is a huge part of it, but it's the events and all the other economic potential that comes out of that stadium. At Macquarie Point, we've seen events at Macquarie Point without a stadium, just a concrete, barren plain as it is right now, and we've seen 20,000+ people there for events at Dark Mofo. It's such a fantastic spot for a stadium, and I think we've seen with the Hurricanes and with other events, there is definitely the demand and the need for something of that scale in Tasmania, so that we can get behind our great sports teams, and we can attend those great events that at the moment we don't really have anywhere to host.
But Simon, I'm shocked to hear that you're not a supporter of the Greens' plan for the plastic domes, the Eden project that they were going to build at Macquarie Point, until they realised that there may be better things that they could be blocking there.
Well, I'm surprised that they were advocating for those plastic domes that would have been well in excess of the height limits they've also been advocating to put in place in Hobart. So there's always this, and you do see it very often with the Greens and their brand of politics, is when they're suggesting something, it's always as an alternative to something that they want to stop. And it's never that they actually want those big bubbles, or it's never that they want, the million other things that they always say, instead of this development, why don't we do this? It's just trying to throw cogs into the gears. It's just trying to distract and to try and befuddle the issue. Because all it is them not wanting anything to happen. So they put all these other wild ideas in place to try and distract the conversation, when in reality they're just simply anti-development, and it's very, very clear. And that's the only real consistent. It's the only real consistent theme in whatever it is that they're advocating for. They only advocate for development when it's used to block another development. Right. We're hearing the stuff at the moment. We're seeing in the news people protesting to restore Lake Pedder. Greens groups advocating and protesting about that, wanting to do away with our great hydro, which is giving us the clean energy that Tasmania is known for. Clearly taking their advice and their leadership from Bob Brown, who once upon a time was actually advocating for Tasmania to build a coal-fired power station instead of hydro. So they advocate for something, but it's only ever because they're trying to stop the thing that they don't like.
That's right. If the Greens didn't have double standards, Simon, they wouldn't have standards at all.
Indeed.
I think it's, and the aspirational piece, you think about our incredible sporting stars, and, the next Mitch Owen that was probably at the game watching, and they're in primary school or just starting high school and inspired to do amazing things. I'm going to the Jack Jumpers game coming up shortly, and thinking about all those little kids bouncing a basketball around in our communities around the state. But it's also the young tradies that are inspired by these big projects. You look at what the Bridgewater Bridge has done for civil construction here in Tasmania. There's so many young people that when they're thinking about what they want to do when they leave school and stuff, they're now saying, actually, I can build something big. I can inspire the rest of the state with the stuff that I'm building. And whether it's one of the most amazing bridges that's being built anywhere in the world, quite frankly, at the moment at Bridgewater, or whether it's a future stadium, you talk about aspiration and inspiring the next generations. It's our sports stars, but it's also our next generation of tradies as well.
Well, yeah, similar, and like you said, similar to our great athletes. I've met some people that are working on the bridge, have worked on the bridge, and talking to them, they can point at, and they point at the bridge as it's going up, and it's fantastic watching it go up, and they look at it and they say, look, I built that, I worked on that, and just like you hear, some of the great landmarks around the world, and you hear people talk about, like, my dad worked on that, or I worked on that, and it's a huge source of pride. And obviously, let's not forget about the job creation potential, and just that economic development and the jobs that are created from things like the bridge and like the stadium when that gets underway. It won't just be the jobs that are created working in the stadium, but all those jobs of people working on the stadium, from the civil engineering and those large works, to the artists that'll be working on the interior and the exterior of the place. There's so many parts and so many people that have real pride in their work, that are looking forward to working on projects like this.
Big time. Now, speaking of building our country, Australia Day, celebrating the best country in the world. I know, obviously, your family has come to this country from other parts and helped build it. I know my grandpa from Lithuania, who fled the Eastern Europe after the end of the Second World War as the Iron Curtain came down. He was a huge part of building this country. Worked in mines here in Tassie and hydro schemes and pipelines in around Australia as well. And I think it's just so amazing to see new migrants to this country becoming new citizens and just really embracing all the incredible opportunities that we have. It's Citizenship Days like we've had over the weekend. It just give me goosebumps every time, because like my grandpa always used to say, we have no idea how lucky we are to be born in this country. And so people who've come to this country and gone through the hard slog of becoming citizens, man, hat goes off to them, hey?
100%. And often, talking to people about Australia Day, but about Australia generally, the migrants, the people like my parents, like your parents, that have come to Australia looking for a better life, often are much, much more patriotic than those that are born Australian. They're the ones that know, how good Tasmania is, because they've lived elsewhere and they've chosen to come here because of how amazing our country is. And some of the politics that goes around Australia Day, and some of the really unfortunate rhetoric that gets said every time this time of year comes around, really does miss the point that what we're celebrating on the 26th of January is nothing other than the founding of a country that I think we should all be able to agree is one of the greatest countries in the world. It's a country that there are reasons why so many people want to move from where they are to Australia to seek a better life, because it is a better life. It's a fantastic life here. We're onto such a fantastic thing, and it's often those migrants that are the ones that really, really openly acknowledge that, because they have seen the other side of that coin.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd probably go further. We're not just one of the best. We are the greatest country in the world. It's such an extraordinary place, and we're lucky enough to live in the best part of the best country on earth too. And I think that conversation around Australia Day and what it means to be Australian, I think there's been a real mood shift in the country. Like I was at a Latrobe Australia Day ceremony in my neck of the woods on Australia Day, and our Premier spoke beautifully there about the theme of Australia Day, which is reflect, recognise and celebrate, and just how important that last piece is. We need to celebrate this incredible country that's given hope to generations of people before us from every corner of the earth. Are we a perfect country? No. Name me one that is. There isn't one. And so for us to be part of this kind of shared journey and shared future together, we need to have that touch point, I think, every year, and hopefully more regularly, where we say, man, this is the greatest country on earth, and what can we do to make it even greater? I think that's a really exciting prospect.
And I think most people realise that, and recent polling reflects that. And I think people are getting sick of being told what to think about things like Australia Day. When we talk about reflect and celebrate, we do need to reflect, because we have a country that is worth celebrating. We've got such a fantastic place that we all live in. Australia wouldn't be where it is if not for the story that's led us to where we are. And much of that are stories that are inspirational and wonderful stories to tell, and some of those are stories that are, would you say regrettable, or would you say perhaps the darker side of our history? And we do need to reflect on that, but we shouldn't say, we saw this with the Crowther statue that was discussed at Hobart Council a few years ago. We do have aspects to our history that we do need to reflect on and learn from. But the reality is, if our country hadn't gone through all the things that it has, it wouldn't be the country that it is today. And I think one thing we can agree on is that Australia and Tasmania today is a fantastic place and it's worth celebrating. But we can only learn from our mistakes and learn from history if we're willing to talk about it and reflect on it, rather than pretend and act like it never happened. And days like Australia Day are a time to celebrate all the fantastic things that make our country what it is, but then also reflect on the other parts of our history that are things that we need to learn from, but are also things that have led us to where we are today, which is a place I think we should all be able to agree is a good place for a country to be, and is the reason why it's such a great country. But the sanitisation, which is something that many advocate for, and the pulling down of statues and the erasure of our national days of celebration, all that does is push all that stuff out of people's mind, and means that we can never learn from our mistakes. It means we can never learn from history. And those that don't learn from history, as the saying goes, are doomed to repeat it. So we do need to be able to have frank conversations about the darker parts of our history. But just because they happened in our past doesn't mean that we shouldn't celebrate who we are today as a country.
So one of my political heroes, Noel Pearson, we came down on different sides of the voice debate, but one of the beautiful things that he would often say is that our country's been the beneficiary of three epic threads: ancient Indigenous heritage, a proud British foundation, and an extraordinary migrant character. And all three of those parts come with their own challenges. I mean, the people that came here in chains and lived at and were imprisoned at Port Arthur and Sarah Island and a whole range of other places around the world. That's also a challenging part of our history. But the experiences, good and bad, that have come together to bring us to where we are is something that we should absolutely recognise and embrace the future that we have together, warts and all.
100%.
Now, Simon, we did promise as well a couple of updates around some housing wins that have happened over the last little bit, both in your neck of the woods and in my neck of the woods. People will be interested to know where are we at with our 10,000 social and affordable homes by 2032 target. So we are on track. We've just exceeded 4,000 of that number. So that means that we're actually a bit ahead of schedule. That's encouraging, but we know that there's more work to be done, and watch this space. But I know in my neck of the woods, in the last couple of days, Devonport City Council unanimously passed a social housing development in town, close to libraries, public transport, shops, job opportunities, all that sort of stuff. So that's really encouraging. There were some great comments from the councillors that spoke in favour of it. And a big shout out to the team at Devonport Council, the Living City. You're doing great things. And Simon, in the appeals tribunal, the development that Vinnies are doing in Argyle Street that will be supporting older women who are at risk of homelessness has actually been passed as well.
It's fantastic. It's great to see these things coming online. That Vinnies project on Argyle Street, I think, is really, really important, and will deliver housing and services to a really vulnerable cohort of people. There is also another one. I won't mention the site because I think it's at the tail end of an appeals process, so I don't want to risk naming it up necessarily. But it's one that was approved by the council quite some time ago, got appealed, and has been stuck in appeals limbo for a very, very long time. And that is something that we do need to work on and address. Is it's really important housing projects, whether private or whether social housing, such as in these cases, can get approved by a council or rejected by a council, but then get stuck in the appeals process for such a long time. And all that means is that's been, I think, almost 2 years where a project that objectively should have been approved was approved by the Hobart Council of all councils, has been stuck waiting. And I think it was 20 dwellings that aren't being provided to people that need that housing. That otherwise would it would have been open and it would have been housing people by now. So that is something that we continue to work on. It's really, really important that we do improve those processes, but it is at the same time so great to see these projects coming online as they are. It's really good to see us, as you said, getting ahead of that target, and seeing more Tasmanians that need that housing support getting access to a roof over their head and home.
And the Vinnie's one, it's a great development, but it has been a frustrating process. And the process really has been punishment in this case. It was recommended for approval by the expert council staff because it met the scheme, as in, it's met the planning rules, so it should get a fair go to go ahead. And, I mean, you've seen it from the other side of things in council yourself with some of these developments. You end up, the current process really can drag things through the mud when most Tasmanians believe that we should be helping people get a roof over their head.
We saw it with the site that I mentioned earlier that was recommended for approval by planning officers. The Hobart Council of all councils approved it, and it's still been stuck in appeals hell, for reasons outside of, I think, the planning merits. And I've spoken to private developers, applicants that have come to council with development applications for housing projects, much needed housing projects. And speaking to them, I've asked them, what's the plan to get the support of the council? And they've said, we don't really actually care what happens to the council. What do you mean? They're like, well, either it'll get rejected, in which case we'll appeal it, or it'll get approved, in which case Hobart Not High Rise or one of the numerous anti-development activist groups will appeal it, in which case it's going to end up in TASCAT one way or another. So, we don't care what happens at council. We've already lawyered up. And what that means is what should be a 42-day statutory process ends up being something that can take 6, 12, 18 months or longer to go through that system. And, what that means is a much, much longer wait for the housing that we need in Tasmania. But it also means, we have a volatile construction market at the moment, and the economics are very volatile. Someone can put forward a development application that meets the planning rules. It can get approved and then get stuck in the appeals process. 18 months later, they can still get approved. So that they can not get rejected at any stage. But what was feasible 18 months ago might not be feasible today. So, as you said, the process is the punishment, and sometimes even just by virtue of the process itself, it can, in effect, be a refusal, because what it means is, what's been approved is no longer commercially viable. And that means, we've seen it. There's so many applications that I know of in Hobart that were approved. So they're on the statistics that, the Lord Mayor likes to say, we've approved all these developments, but they haven't been built, and then they likely won't get built because the process took so long, or it was bartered down in size to a point where, whilst it was approved, it's no longer commercially feasible, so it won't get built. And approving something that isn't commercially viable is no different to a refusal. And that's something that ability for groups like Hobart Not High Rise, groups there's so many. The ability for them to frustrate that process just means fewer people with access to housing in Tasmania, and it means fewer people, in fewer tradies with jobs. It means all those things, and it's not by virtue of somebody putting up an application that doesn't meet our planning rules. It's just because someone's someone knows that they can frustrate that system to the point of effectively blocking a project from occurring.
Yeah, that's right. And, I think the community is waking up to some of these problems that politicians have built up in our system over many, many years. If you're building homes or growing a business, you should get a fair go against the planning rules. And I think that's why it's so fundamental, some of the work that we have underway. And now, Simon, our time is at an end, but thanks for joining us again this week. Just a reminder to everyone, if you do have questions, we'll be doing a mailbag show pretty soon. So either send us an email, drop us some comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to answer and discuss some of the questions and things that really matter to you as well. So, Simon, thanks for your time, and go the Hurricanes.
Cheers, mate. Thanks, everyone.